Greetings, fellow Gorehounds, and welcome back to a Blood Splattered vlog. I'm the Horror Guru.
And I'm Count Jackula.
And today we're going to talk about Getaway, a British horror comedy from director Steffen Haars and writer Nick Frost, who previously worked together on Crazy House. Now, this movie is not as insane as Crazy House, but it is a pretty funny movie. It's about a British family who is going on vacation in Sweden and decide to stop in this one town in which a cannibalistic ritual takes place every year, except they don't actually eat people, but it's
a ritual based on a cannibalistic event.
Basically, the British occupied this village at one point and cannibalism took place because of their, poor governance.
All right, you're gonna eat each other now.
Yeah.
For the entertainment of the king.
Well, it was more like they were on an island and then they blocked off the ports for some stupid reason, and so they couldn't get food in or out of the island, so.
Yeah.
People started eating each other because that's the British way. Make the commoners eat each other.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm considering how many times it's sort of and then we just had to eat each other.
Yep.
I'm actually, how far away from cannibalism are humans?
So basically, this movie is a comedy that's playing on the tropes of folk horror movies. We're talking movies like The Wicker Man or Midsummer.
Yeah.
But there's a shift that happens halfway through the movie that completely upends the entire movie's premise, but we can't talk about it without going into spoilers, so we're going to save that for the spoilers section.
Yeah.
Because it completely changes the entire dynamic of the movie.
Yeah.
In fact, it changes it so much that when I was watching the first half of the movie, I was making many mental notes on the things that didn't make sense and wasn't adding up.
But I pegged it.
You pegged it. You 100% pegged it.
I pegged it.
You guessed what was happening the whole time, whereas I was sitting there just kind of going well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't seem like something a character like that would say. What's going on here? I was initially chalking it up to poor writing or they just think if they're funny enough, they can get away without really thinking through the premise or whatever. But once the shift happens, the thing that Jack ended up calling really early on, everything that I was complaining about in my head suddenly made perfect sense. So if you do have the same experience I was having, stick with it, because halfway through the movie shifts in a way that you may end up liking more than the way it began.
Yeah.
So there you go. The movie is legitimately funny. I wouldn't say it's as funny as, say, a Shaun of the Dead.
No, it's not Shaun of the Dead, but it's not exactly that kind of humor either.
No. What's interesting about this movie is the humor is mainly centered around the family bickering with one another and the funny dialogue within that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where most of the humor comes from in this movie. And then once you start getting to the halfway point of the movie, just absurd, grotesque violence.
Yeah.
There's a lot of humor making fun of British colonialism.
Yes.
As well as tourists.
Yes.
Because these main characters, I'm going to warn you right now, are the worst kinds of tourists. Mocking the culture around them as they're witnessing it.
Yeah.
Oh, you should be fine if I make fun of your accent in front of you. And it's
that's pretty shitty,
It's pretty shitty, actually. You're in his country. That's shitty in your own country.
Yeah.
Much less going to their country and doing that.
Yeah.
That's pretty messed up. So you're going to find the characters pretty unlikable in the beginning. But I'm going to tell you, yet again, you get to that halfway point and suddenly I love most of these characters.
Yeah.
So Nick Frost does a pretty good job in the first movie of his I've seen that I think he wrote entirely himself.
Yeah.
The writing in it is actually well done. When you get to the end and everything comes together.
It becomes a farce.
It becomes a farce. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It doesn't start that way, but it ends up being a farce.
100%.
It's not even making fun of folk horror movies.
No. It's playing on the tropes.
Yeah.
But it's not making fun of it.
Yeah. It's more like it's a folk horror movie where everyone's kind of an idiot.
Yup.
It's
also not criticizing them.
No.
I also thought the performances in this movie were really well done. There's a lot of subtle things the characters do at the beginning of the movie that make the shift that happens towards the midpoint of the movie make a lot of sense and make it work. There's some interesting decisions made early on in this movie, acting-wise.
Yes.
That actually pay off.
Yes.
So yeah, this movie was in theaters last year. We missed it, but we caught it on demand. You can go check it out and pick your poison. Whichever one happens to be streaming it right now that you prefer to rent from, go ahead and do so, especially if you're a fan of Nick Frost, if you're a fan of horror comedies, and if you would like some sort of twist on the folk horror genre, because this movie definitely provides that. How about we move on to that spoiler section?
Yeah, let's move on to that spoiler section.
Because it's really hard to talk about what's awesome about this movie without talking about that specific shift. So,
yeah.
Here we go.
Turns out, Nick Frost, his wife, and their 2 kids, not a family.
Nope.
They are a group of serial killers.
They're essentially role-playing a family as part of their game, and they're going to this island specifically, despite all the warning signs put in front of them, like this creepy fucking, like, village cult that appears to be there, that may or may not be cannibalistic, and despite all the warnings given to them along the way from everyone from, like, the locals across the waterway to the cops and everyone in between, they still go to this island. And it's to the point where I was sitting there going like, it actually now no longer makes sense why these people are even setting foot on this island anymore. Because
because you're like, why are you even here?
It turns out it all makes sense because they're going to this island because it's going to be locked off for this ceremony, this cannibal ceremony, which is actually a play. It's not really
it's not really a ritual.
They're not eating people. And because it's going to be locked off, that means they can kill everyone on the island and no one will be none the wiser. It turns out it's not actually a folk horror movie, it's a serial killer slasher movie. We just happen to be following the slasher killers as they stalk their victims without realizing it.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt that everyone on the island is a massive creep.
Oh yeah, they're either super creepy, needlessly so.
Yeah.
Or they're just kind of a dick.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, there's this one character who, like, is stalking the girl throughout the fucking house and, like, stealing her underwear and shit.
That's a great example of, like, a interesting choice made early on, both in the writing and in the performances of the characters, because you have this character who is much older than the teenage daughter.
Yeah. Yeah,
who
way
is
older.
Probably not actually teenage, given the revelation midpoint in the movie.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, you're told at the beginning of the movie she is the teenage daughter of this family. You have this creepy older guy who's like lusting after her for like the first half of this movie, to the point where she's pretty convinced and even makes it known that he is stalking her through cameras that are probably hidden in objects throughout the house, including her mirror.
Yeah, but then they don't do anything about it.
And in fact, when she tells her dad that, the dad, like, just kind of shrugs it off. Say you're a father, and you just found out that some creepy man whose B&B you're staying in, he's creeping on your daughter.
Yeah.
What do? Shrug it off and just, like, walk away like you don't give a shit? Or do you go confront the man who's creeping on your daughter because...
Yeah.
It's your daughter, right?
Yeah. Because the way Nick Frost does it is more like, well, you handle it.
But the revelation that he's not actually her father and that she's not actually concerned because she's actually stalking this guy the whole time, which is why early on in the movie, it almost seems like she's into his advances.
Yeah.
Which felt weird because she's like into his advances, but then later on does this thing where she like hides their conversation by turning on the water faucet and then acts really freaked out about him stalking her, which felt like a weird like character shift out of nowhere. And then like you find out that she's actually a serial killer. She put on that show for him.
Yes.
She was pretending to hide it with the water faucet, but knew he was going to hear it anyway so that she can lure him into her trap. Great example of like a whole bunch of stuff not making sense at the beginning, but makes sense once this twist happens.
Yeah. She's putting on the show of being scared.
Yep, absolutely.
Know? And like the Nick Frost character is kind of not picking up on it.
No.
He and that woman might be married.
They might actually be a couple, but they're not actually like
parents.
They're not parents.
Yeah.
Which is kind of given away by the fact that they're the only ones throughout the entire movie who call each other mommy and daddy.
Yeah.
Like the kids don't refer to them as mom and dad at all throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
Another great example of a moment that just made me go like, okay, I know this is partially for comedic effect. They arrive on the island, and the entirety of the island has greeted them at the dock and is staring at them like a creepy-ass folk horror cult.
Yeah.
Telling them to go.
Yeah, Children of the Corn style.
Yeah, like, you gotta go. There's even like a witch-like lady who's just like, you don't belong here. And I'm sitting there going like, okay, I understand you guys are on vacation. And I understand you guys really need this vacation. You've had a stressful year. But there's no fucking way staying on that island was gonna be stress-free.
Yeah.
With this creepy-ass fucking cult staring at you and demanding you get out. It's like when people move into the haunted house and the haunted house tells them to get out and they don't.
Yeah.
It's kind of like one of those moments. And I'm sitting there going like, I don't know if I believe this family would actually stay on this island after this point. But then once that revelation happens that, no, this is all part of their plan.
Yeah, even like their whole, like, they do have like a moment where you're like, you sure you want to do this place? Like, I mean, I don't mind killing them, but like, they're a little weird, you know what I mean?
And then the movie takes it like a step further because, okay, you had that, you had that initial confrontation on the docks, right?
Yeah.
But then that night, the night they stay there the first time, the entire cult shows up in creepy masks, banging their fucking like creepy drums and leaving dead animals on their porch.
Yeah.
And they know it's the village because they just met them earlier.
Yep.
And then they just go about like, oh, hey, let's just go hiking tomorrow. Like... And I'm like, I know that's partially because it's funny, but I'm also sitting there going like, yeah, but now you're really stretching the credibility of the fucking like premise to the point where I'm not sure if I'm buying it anymore. But if it was going to go full comedy, I was going to roll with it.
Right.
But then it does kind of go full comedy, but full horror comedy.
Yeah.
And they just start slaughtering people on the island. 2 Iron Maidens run to the hills.
Yeah.
Best use of the song I've seen in a long time. And it's just a gore fest at that point.
Yeah.
It's just watching them gleefully slaughter people. Because of all the rumors about the island, because the people on the mainland fear the people on the island, they're able to stage the entire scenario so the cops think that all the people that were killed were because of the islanders.
Yeah.
And that they're the innocent, like, vacationers who are attacked by the creepy cult. They're the girl at the end of Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the truck, except it turns out Leatherface is innocent.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they say the line that was so on the nose, but it was what I was thinking throughout the entire twist of the movie. The family that slays together stays together. Not entirely true, because another big twist thing that happens throughout this movie, once we find out that they are all serial killers, one of the ways they reveal that they're not actually a family is when the dad just kills the son because he's been so annoyed with him the entire trip.
The son's just being such a fucking putz the entire time.
And he calls him by a different name, and the other guy calls him by a different name, and that's when they reveal that they're not actually a family, they're not actually...
Yeah, and then Nick Frost just fucking kills him.
Yeah, and this is where the weirdest and the most unexplained part of the movie happens, but I kind of like it. They basically say, next time we gotta vet a different brother.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, hold on. Are you telling me that there's like a community and maybe even like an organized effort of like serial killers getting together and doing this?
Yeah.
It's like a thing that you vet brothers, like you're vetting a fucking like waiter for your restaurant.
Or a roommate.
Or a roommate. You just put out the help wanted ad and the serial killer will join you. And that's what's implied during this whole exchange.
Yeah. There's kind of implied that there's like this underground society where they actually like kind of meet up and compare notes and things.
The other thing that makes this twist so brilliant is it also explains why they're such shitty tourists who seem to be like unaware of how shitty they are. No, they're actually fully aware.
Yeah.
They're antagonizing people intentionally.
Yep.
They're intentionally creating conflict. Not only feeds into the narrative that, oh, the locals hurt them because they came in and were being like insensitive.
Yeah.
So it makes them look like, oh yeah, of course the locals would target them after that. But more than that, it also creates the conflicts that will set up the traps for them to lay later.
Yep. Well, you can find me here on YouTube where I stream pretty much every weekday starting between 7 and 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and going on usually at least 2 hours. We talk about all kinds of groovy things things, and I'd love to see you there. And you should join us.
Y'all know me, I'm the Horror Guru. You can find me on Blue Sky as well as various other social media platforms, but to be completely honest, besides YouTube, I mainly use Blue Sky, so go follow me over there. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you're notified of my videos immediately upon their upload. And if you'd like to help out either of us more directly, be sure to check out our Patreon pages, and remember, if you decide to go the Patreon route, even $1 a month can go a long way, but we will certainly accept more. And with that said, my fellow Gorehounds, I want you to comment below, and be sure to comment below using the hashtag SlaysTogether. Use the hashtag SlaysTogether, that way I know. That way Jack knows. That way the whole world knows that you know what happens halfway through this movie. And so with that said, my fellow Gorehounds, we got a couple more vlogs to record, and it is very late, and we are very tired, so we're gonna go do that. Peace out.
Peace out.
And we'll catch y'all later.